Inspire Podcast, where mental health meets real life. I'm your host, Samantha Ariza, therapist, educator, and semi-normal human being, but overall, your go-to for real, relatable conversations about healing, growth, and emotional wellness. Around here, we believe that mental health does not have to be stiff or scary. We keep it human, practical, and a little bit fun. You know, we like to have fun here along the way because life's messy and we're all just trying to figure it out. Each week, you'll get honest insight, science-backed tools, and stories that remind you you're not alone in this. Whether you're on your own healing journey or supporting someone else, there's something here for you. So take a breath, grab a cup of coffee, get a little bit comfy, and let's dive in. Today's episode dives into a phrase that's often whispered behind someone's back, but let's be real. Sometimes it's said in front of somebody as a moment of frustration, that setting boundaries is selfish. And maybe you've heard it. Maybe you've felt it. Maybe you've even said it yourself. But let's be real. When someone tells us, I can't do that for you, or I need space, or that doesn't work for me, it can sting. But does that make it selfish? So today we're going to unpack it. Why people often perceive boundaries as rejection, the psychology of healthy boundaries, and what the research says about boundaries, mental health, and interpersonal functioning. As well as, hey, how do we reframe boundaries as something that protects relationships and not destroy them? So let's get into it. So let's start with why this belief that setting boundaries is selfish is so common. Boundaries are limits, and limits can sometimes feel like rejection, especially if you've been raised in an environment where love was equated with that idea of self-sacrifice. Think about it. If you grew up with messages like, good kids do what they're told, family always comes first, or you're just being dramatic, then you might associate boundaries with coldness, distance, or even punishment. So when someone sets a boundary with you and your nervous system might hear, you don't matter, even if what they're truly saying is, I'm taking care of myself so I can show up better. But here's the thing, boundaries are not barriers to connections. They're the blueprint for sustainable relationships. So let's bring in the science. What does science say about boundaries and mental health? Let's look at this study about boundaries and psychological health. This study took place in 2019, and it was published in the Journal of Counseling Psychology. And it found that individuals with high boundary setting ability reported significantly lower levels of depression and anxiety, and greater overall life satisfaction. In fact, boundary setting skills predicted emotional resilience, even when accounting for personality traits and trauma history. The authors of that study concluded that the ability to set and maintain boundaries served as a protective factor against psychological distress. But that's not the only study. Another study published in the Journal of Marital and Family Therapy in 2020 looked at 340 couples and found that those who were able to clearly communicate boundaries around personal space, emotional needs, and even digital privacy had higher levels of intimacy and lower levels of resentment. Why? Because clarity creates safety. And when people know what's okay and what's not, it reduces guesswork and emotional landmines. And we've all stepped on some emotional landmines in our relationships, haven't we? But let's look into some cultural considerations. A 2021 cross-cultural study in Frontiers in Psychology examined how boundary setting was perceived in different cultures, collectivists versus individualists. In a collectivist culture, boundaries were often perceived as disloyalty, particularly in families. And collectivist cultures are just kind of those big grouped kind of cultures that look as family and unified and look at people as a big group. We are all parts of this big family of origin. It's not the individual, it's about the big group. And so collectivist cultures talk about that. So when a collectivist has boundaries, it's like, hold on. You're putting yourself above the group, and that's a no no. But in individualist cultures, boundaries were more likely to be seen as healthy self respect. And in America, we're big individualists. There's a lot of other cultures that look at the families and, highlight being together as a unit. But in America, that's not what we do. We're individualists. So when we look at boundaries, we're thinking, yes, that person is doing what's right for them. But that's, again, a sign of a different culture. And it's not something that's seen in everyone. So, what's the takeaway of this? That the belief that boundaries are selfish isn't universal. It's something that we've learned and something we've gathered from different communities that we've been a part of. If you are a part of like a collectivist culture, different countries, I would say probably more Eastern than Western, they see themselves as more as collectivists. They learn that setting boundaries and putting yourself above the group is a no no, but it's something that can be unlearned. So, why do people get mad when you set a boundary? Because let's get real for a second. A lot of people aren't happy when you set a boundary. And there are some people who do get mad when you set a boundary. They're mad that your boundary usually is disrupting the benefit they used to get when you had none. If you used to always say yes, and now you're saying, not this time, or I can't do that for you, that's a shift, and people feel it. But here's something worth remembering: your boundary is not a betrayal, it's a filter. It shows who respects your needs and who only wants access to your energy, even at your own expense. And look, we can hold compassion for people who feel hurt or confused, but compassion does not mean collapsing your needs to keep others comfortable. And that's something that I talk about with my clients a lot when we talk about boundary setting. It's this idea about other people being mad or other people reacting. And a lot of times I'm like, but doesn't that say something to you? The fact that they're so upset that you are saying no to them? Because I feel like that's quite telling of the other person. So, a lot of times when we do start setting boundaries, we do find that people kind of disappear. And a lot of times it's because they benefited from the fact that you did not have any. So let's break this down even further, because what are some boundary types? What are some examples? And how do we say no? Because boundaries aren't just about saying no. It could be more than just, about blocking your ex or turning off your phone or even deleting TikTok or social media in general. I'm talking about real supportive boundaries that protect all of your peace and preserve your energy. So let's break them down into these 5 core types, and I'll give you some phrases to use in your life when we're dealing with these kind of boundaries. The first one is a physical boundary. Again, this is protecting your body, your space, your comfort with physical touch or proximity. You can say stuff like, I'm not comfortable hugging people I don't know as well. You can also be like, hey, I need a little more personal space right now. Maybe you don't want to shake hands. So you're like, hey, I prefer not to shake hands, but it's nice to meet you. And the best one to take away is please don't touch me without asking. Why does this matter though? You get to decide who touches you and how and when, even in cultures or families where physical affection is expected. It's not rude for setting that line. The next one is emotional boundaries. This is defined as protecting your energy, your empathy, your emotional labor. They help you care without overextending. So you can say things like, I care about you. I just can't be your only support system right now. You can say, I'm listening, but I don't necessarily have the capacity to give advice today. You can also say stuff like, this conversation starting to be a little overwhelming for me. Can we pause it for now? We can also say, hey, I support you. I just can't be the only person you lean on. And why does this matter? Because, hey, you're not a therapist. Maybe you're just a friend or a sibling or a partner and you care and it matters, but so does your capacity. When you set emotional boundaries, you're protecting yourself from compassion fatigue and resentment. There is also time boundaries. These are about protecting your availability and energy, especially from overcommitment or feeling like you're on call all the time. You can say, hey, I'm not available to talk after 9 p.m. anymore. Or even, I'm trying to reserve my evenings for rest. You can even say things like, can we schedule that conversation for tomorrow? I don't have that bandwidth right now. Or, hey, I can hang out, but I'll need to leave by 7. Why does this matter? Why does it matter to kind of set these time constraints? Because you're not obligated to be endlessly available to your job, to your friends, your group chat, or anyone else. Time boundaries reinforce that your presence is a choice and not an expectation. There are also digital boundaries. These involve how you engage online and what you consent to share, and how people can access you digitally, because we do live in such a digital world. Everything is accessible online nowadays. So, how do we protect that? You can tell people, hey, I don't want my photos shared online without my consent. Please don't tag me in these things. Or, hey, when you're going on vacation, hey, I'm logging off for a few days to reset. Or I'm not discussing this over text. Can we talk in person? Because that's a big one too. I feel like nowadays, since we can just text anyone, anytime when we're dealing with stuff, it kind of just makes it like that conversation's right now. But so much can be lost over text message that if we just take a second and be like, I don't know if texting this conversation is a good thing for me or a good time. Can we just talk in person? That is setting that digital boundary saying, hey, I don't want to miss out on the context of this situation. Let's talk in person. And why does this matter? Again, we live online, but that doesn't mean that people get unlimited access to you. Setting these digital boundaries helps protect your mental health and your privacy. And last but certainly not least, we're talking about energy boundaries. These are about your felt sense of energy and overwhelm, and they protect your nervous system. You can be like, hey, I need alone time after work to recharge. And if you're an introvert like me, that's super important. You can say, hey, it's not personal. I just need quiet tonight. Or I'd love to go out, but my social battery is low. You can say, I'm choosing rest today instead of being on. And these are big ones. Like I said, if you're an introvert and you feel like that social battery is super low and you just can't people anymore, having energy boundaries is super important. I always laugh and I tell this story about how my husband's the extrovert. So when we have people over, a lot of times my battery's done and I have to peace out. My friends know that there'll be like a time where I'm like, hey, good night, everyone. I'm going to bed. Half the time I'm not going to sleep, let's be honest. I'm just kind of scrolling. But my energy is done. I need to disconnect. And then my husband gets to go, clean up, put them, have everybody leave, lock the doors and all that. But he's an extrovert, so that's good. But I have to reset. Why does it matter again? Because your energy is not infinite. If you feel drained or overstimulated or like you're constantly performing, that is your sign, my friend, that your energy boundaries need strengthening. But each one of these areas is valid. Each one of these sayings is true because you want to say, here is how I stay connected to you, but I don't want to burn out. They're not walls, they're clarity. A lot of times I compare boundaries to like fences. Fences are things we can see through, fences we can talk over. They protect our peace, but they're not walls. Walls are impenetrable. And we're not walling off from people. We're just saying, hey, I need some space. Here is this boundary for me. Because these boundaries don't push people away. They show people how to honor you properly. So just start small. You can practice one sentence. A lot of times I tell clients kind of have things prepared so you're ready to go. Because you don't owe anyone access to every part of you just because they're used to having it. Here at Ariza Inspire Co., we want to make sure that we are able to give tools to everyone who needs it. You have been hearing about my Resilience X 6-week workshop on resilience. However, I've decided that we are going to do kind of like mini workshops now. I have decided that we are going to do 30-minute skill-based resilience workshops, one-offs that kind of take some of the skills from the Resilience X program and curriculum, but condenses it and kind of gives you like that quick tip to help you get to where you want to be. Resilience is that ability to bounce back and get back on track. And sometimes our resilience can, falter. So I want you to take the opportunity to sign up for these 30-minute resilience skill workshops. You'll see some of the dates over here. You will find the link in the bio, but the spaces are limited. I don't want this to be a huge thing. I want to still be able to help people in this kind of small group setting. So don't waste time today. See if you can hop on to the next one coming up soon. But let's talk about that thing in that corner that we haven't talked about. Guilt. Everyone has guilt. So many of us feel guilty when we say no, especially if we're used to people pleasing or avoiding conflict. But let's reframe guilt. Psychologist Dr. Nedra Glover-Tawwab, author of Set Boundaries, Find Peace, puts it this way. Guilt is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that you're doing something new. Guilt is a growing pain. It's a sign that you're healing from old programming. And the more that you practice, the more that you move away, the less guilt sticks around. I usually frame guilt as a way that we are breaking away from like old beliefs and core beliefs that we have. These are like integral to who we are, and that's why we feel this pushback most of the time. If I believe that I am an honest person, if I tell a lie, that's going to make me feel guilty because I have this core belief that I'm an honest person. So if we are feeling guilt, a lot of times it's because we have to sit there and kind of look at what is that core belief that is being challenged at this point inside of me? What core belief do I need to rewrite at this moment? Because there's a cost of not setting boundaries. What do you think happens when you don't set a boundary? You overextend yourself. You resent the people you love. You collapse into burnout, and you feel like no one sees you. You also lose trust in your own voice and don't trust yourself. And that's not noble. That's destructive. And ironically, when we people please to keep the peace, we usually end up creating more conflict because resentment builds where boundaries don't exist. And we've mentioned resentment a couple times so far, but what does that really mean? According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, resentment is a feeling of indignant displeasure or persistent ill will at something regarded as a wrong insult or injury. Psychology Today describes it as the combination of unpleasant feelings and thoughts you experience when you do not get what you feel you deserve, even when you see other people get something you think they do not deserve. The Berkeley Wellbeing Institute said that. But if we were to get a more succinct definition, we could put it this way. A complex, multi-layered emotional reaction to being mistreated or wronged by another person, situation, or series of circumstances. So in short, when we talk about resentment is feeling wronged, whether it's real or perceived, plus holding on to that feeling over time, plus a sense of injustice or that's not fair. There was a study called Resentment, the Complexity of an Emotion and Its Effect by Schneider in 2023. And this explained that resentment is more than anger. It's moral injury, rumination, and ongoing threat rather than a momentary emotion. The key points of resentment are this, that resentment involves a cognitive component, that I am wronged and this is unjust. which often leads to rumination, this repetitive thinking about the offense. And unlike anger, which is often reactive, resentment is sustained. So, what does that mean? Resentment is just not a fleeting annoyance. It's a complex, emotionally cognitive state tied to that perceived injustice. And it tends to be chronic. So when you feel wronged and hold on to that feeling, it can persist and affect your relationships, your mood, your health. And research links resentment with poorer well-being, lower life satisfaction, and worse physical health outcomes. But there is hope. Forgiveness or resolution of the perceived injury is tied to improved outcomes. The Almeida study in older adults shows that letting go of anger and resentment can improve life quality. So how do we set boundaries without burning bridges? Because we want to make this practical. If you're ready to start setting boundaries but are scared of the backlash, here's a script you can try. I care about you and I want to be honest about what I can realistically give. I'm setting this boundary not to shut you out, but so I can stay connected in a healthy way. It shows empathy, clarity, which means it equals strength. And if they still get mad, that's on them. That's their work, not yours. So let's go back to the original hot take. Setting boundaries is selfish. So here's my response. Boundaries aren't selfish. They're how we stay honest, connected, and sane. They're how we protect our peace without destroying our relationships. They're not walls. They're bridges. They're fences built with care. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to disappoint people. And if someone tells you you're being selfish for setting a boundary, just smile and remember, it's not selfish to take care of yourself. But that's it for today's episode, and thanks for hanging out with me. I'm glad you're not bored of me yet. If you found something helpful, inspiring, or even just validating, I'd love it if you'd follow the show, leave a review, or just share this episode with someone who might need it. Want more tools to support your mental wellness journey? Head over to arizainspire.com, where you'll find free resources, self-paced courses, and workbooks to help you heal, grow, and show up for yourself. There's a ton of resources there, so just go look around. And don't forget to follow along on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook at Ariza Inspire, because that's where we keep this conversation going, share mental health tips, and post about new episodes. But until next time, my friend, as I say, take care of yourself, and I'll catch you next time.